I want to start this episode off with a question. It's a horrible question, but I want to make a point. Let's say you find yourself in a combat zone someplace. You know the enemy is out there someplace, but you're just not quite sure where. Suddenly you hear what sounds like a firecracker, and the guy next to you drops over dead with a big hole in his chest. What do you do? Cue intro music and explanation. When I ask that question to most people, they tell me they would dive for cover, or hide, or run. Sometimes they ask me if they're armed because they'd like to return fire downrange after taking cover. I get variations on the theme, but out of all the answers I've been given, not a single person gives me the answer that almost every game that I've ever played gives. To demonstrate, let's turn to Defiance. Okay, I know I could be accused of using this game as a whipping boy, but it does so much wrong that it's just a prime candidate to demonstrate any given problem. So, being a shooter game, you have access to things like sniper rifles. So you get within range to let the bad guys res with your sniper rifle, and you take a single shot. You'll notice what's happening here. Every bad guy instantly turns and charges straight at the player. They close the gap to engage in point-blank range, if not outright melee range. Before you start saying that I'm picking on Defiance on here, I'm not. This is every MMO that I've ever played. World of Warcraft, DCUO, Terra, DDO, the SWTOR. Every single MMO that I've ever played has the same effect. You fire one shot, the entire horde turns and charges at you. This is counterintuitive to everything that normal people would do. Except, of course, in gamer logic. According to gamer logic, I suppose, why not close the gap? When it takes a full clip of 30 caliber ammunition to down one person, or sometimes 2 or 3 50 caliber sniper rounds, why not? Take your chances that the other guy isn't carrying enough ammo and move in for the high percentage shot. Besides, blades don't need reloading and ballistic armor is useless against sharpened pointies. And since I invoked reality, one could argue that there was a study that reported that all firefights take place within 20 feet. This was a study of New York police shootouts, and the statistics are interesting to read. Most shootouts were under 6 feet, the officer fired less than 3 times, and the hit percentage was under 30%. Plus, most of these instances were in urban settings and not wide open areas like MMOs usually are. If anything, MMOs are more like Afghanistan than urban sprawl, and you run into the problem that the US military is having with the range there, but I'm getting mired in details. Besides, it's also been argued to me that it wouldn't be fair if players could sit back and just kill other people at long range. Where's the fun in being able to one-shot someone from distance as opposed to getting in there and pummeling them with your bare fists? If the argument is to be believed, people would just never go anywhere if that was the case. In World of Warcraft, someone once made the argument that being able to kill his Death Knight at long range wouldn't be fair, and how he'd quit playing if a hunter could kill him from a long way away. That's the whole point. There's a reason that we don't give soldiers things like swords and cleavers and we give them rifles. It's because rifles and firearms work. They stop people at range. Why give me a ranged weapon that's not going to stop somebody from simply gallivanting up to me and stabbing me in the face with a knife? Oh yeah, gamer logic. In a way, I get why games are designed this way. If your quest is to go out into the world and kill X number of Y, and the Y herd runs when you fire a single shot, it would take forever to get X. So, for the sake of the players, NPCs can't have any sense of self-preservation. Missions go faster if the wounded NPC runs right at the player rather than diving for cover. Besides, the player will close the gap themselves if the NPC doesn't. And for that matter, I get why enemies seem to have no sense of self-preservation in general. I mean, some animals will defend their young, so okay, I'll buy into that. And I'll also buy into the mindless argument like zombies lust for brains, and okay, I'll bite. But in the real world, not everything charges straight at you when you fire at it or wound it. Ask any deer hunter about blood tracking, I guarantee you're in for a hell of a story. However, I think there's something more going on here. I think there's something cultural going on here. Okay, every time I start talking about stuff like this, I get people from other countries saying, "Oh, no, you're wrong, that's just an American thing, you know, Okay, it might just be an American thing, but some part of me doubts that. Going back to WoW, hunter players are seen to be weak gamers. Now, according to the popular myth, they're not in the action, they have their pet do all their combat for them, and these guys just camp anyway, so it's seen as, for lack of a better way to put it, dishonorable. I have to explain a little bit of American culture here. The idea of the old Western showdown is distinctly American. The idea of not backing down and not hiding behind cover and looking the other guy in the eye as he does the same and taking it like a man if you lose. Very macho. Very stupid, but very macho, I guess. You know, actually come to think of it, doing showdowns like this is just a good way to get yourself killed. There's a reason that we don't do Civil War tactics anymore of one line kneel, second line stand, and just stand and shoot each other. Matter of fact, if you want a really good analog, you have to... Damn it. There's a variant of paintball that's played in wide open arena style field. You can literally see everything that happens on the field from almost any given position. This variant evolved into a pretty predictive game of toe-to-toe snap shooting matches, point-blank glory moves, and people using the same cover every game. It's a Western showdown behind balloons. You can play dozens of arena games like this in a day, so it's gotten pretty popular. On the other hand, a traditional Woods-style paintball game is way different, but a lot of players play the Woods game with the same fast-paced mentality, wearing their flashy jerseys and expecting to go toe-to-toe. For the most part, though, I didn't do that. I'm old school. I learned how to play a different game. You know, crawling, long-range shooting, camouflage, stealth. It's all tools in my arsenal. It's led to some choice words from my opponents over the years, and I've been accused of everything from cheating to playing cheap to having threats of physical violence against my person for camping. The truth of the matter is they were just angry because I refused to play by their implied rules. Being sneaky is, by the implied rules, deceptive. The unspoken rule is that real men aren't deceptive. It's un-American and unmanly to try to fool your opponent rather than you use just raw force to beat them into the ground. Might makes right. It's the American way. So let's put this mentality into an MMO. When someone kills you and you don't see it, the first reaction is always to call them campers or noobs or other names I'm not going to repeat. They resort to name-calling because it's cheap, dishonest, and dare I even say dishonorable in their minds to change the status quo. You didn't face them like a man, you were hiding, and in gamer logic, that's a cheap win. Ironically, most of this yelling comes from people who believe that tactics are a new form of breath mint. Okay, let's get back to PvE world. So how does this attitude relate to things like MMO gaming? Well, a lot, actually. Because of this stigma, games go out of their way to create a soft punishment for players who would rather hang back and pick their shots. Once again, defiance. World events have this running scorecard, which determines how much loot you get at the end of the event. The scorecard rewards players who gunfight over those who snipe, so the message is actually pretty clear. Campers don't get rewarded, gunfighters do. Well, that and the bad guys have this uncanny ability to find people who are sniping and lob grenades and fireballs on them from another zip code and land them with pinpoint accuracy on campers. Other games do similar with things like boss mechanics. DCUO will suddenly have bad guys discover where the player at extreme range is and then lunge directly at them completely out of context. It would be funny if it wasn't commonplace in every MMO ever. Well, it's either the bad guy does it or he has hordes of minions that appear out of nowhere that do it for him. On the other side of the gun, a lot of people would break their keyboards if NPCs had the ability to one-shot snipe them out of nowhere. I've seen it happen in PvP in World of Tanks. When the artillery gets someone, it's almost always followed by a string of profanity directed at the arty. Most players don't know how to move around a combat zone, and they literally just run down the middle of the road completely oblivious to the world around them. There's also this self-preservation thing. If NPCs ran away, the player would probably feel compelled to give chase so they could kill them properly. This actually leads to another topic I've been thinking about doing, talking about how gamers act psychotic. But not this video. So it's a fair question. What exactly am I expecting out of this? How about a little respect for your ranged DPS guys? Back in the real world, when I used to show up to a paintball field in my ghillie suit, people would just assume that I was going to be a useless player. They just assumed that because of what I was wearing, I was going to sit at the back of the field, wait for opponents to come to me, and then take pot shots at them. There was also the overshooting because, you know, players in ghillie suits are campers and not real players, so they need to be punished. It's one of the reasons I never really used my ghillie suit, and I would just stick to normal camo instead. The stigma carries into the gaming world too. Almost every MMO I've played, the ranged combat is a joke. You might as well club the bad guys with a gun instead, you do just as much good. This isn't to say that you can't use real-world techniques to minimize the Zerg rush, or sometimes even avoid it, but most of the time, you might as well have a neon sign over your head with an arrow pointing down at you. The irony, well, at least to me, is that if everyone had a melee thing, nobody would be able to get any damage done, at least in the real world. You may have seen this fencing video. If not, it's really worth looking up. It's quite entertaining. One of the things that always strikes me about it is that in the melee, the 50 people could have all just rushed. They didn't, because there was really no room for them to make strikes if they all did that. You need skilled ranged shooters if for no other reason than to allow the melee guys room to swing. I get it. There's going to be a vocal percentage of players who say that going toe-to-toe is going to be a lot more exciting than just sitting back and plinking. I understand that. I also understand that dev teams figure that nobody's going to have a lot of fun in our game if they just sit back and sit in a bush the entire time. I understand that too. But my take on it is that if you're going to put stuff in your game like sniper rifles and other ranged weapons, at least have some respect for the guys who know how to use it. That's all I'm saying. One more really quick thing before I go, call it a public service announcement. Shirt I've been wearing the entire time here. If you think this is a pretty cool shirt, you can actually pick one of these up yourself. It's in the Extra Life shop. I'm going to put a link to it down below. The proceeds from the sale of this shirt are going to help a Children's Miracle Network hospital in your area based on your zip code. So your money's going to stay local and help some sick kids out. What are you waiting for? Click on the link. Get one of these shirts. It's cool.